Hey everybody, it's Brian, and just real quick before I get to this video, I do want to apologize. It has been over a year since I've done this install. I realized with everything that's happened, I was not able to get these edited and get them in. I just got too busy with things going on. So as I'm recording this to you today, it's November of 2020, and if you are watching this in the future, check out your history books. 2020 has been a heck of a year. Anyway, I want to share with you this video still on this install. I do have the water heater. It's been running just fine for this year. We've got the 75-gallon Richmond water heater. The sidearm heat exchanger has been working flawlessly. Everything's been working great for us. So let's get into the video. I have broken it up into multiple parts just to keep the length down a little bit. So I hope you enjoy it. This first part that you're watching right now, this is just kind of an explanation as to why I had to do what I did and the parts and stuff that were needed to replace it. So make sure if you ever install one of these sidearms or if you reinstall a water heater, you've got everything and you know what you're doing. That was part of my hiccup. So we'll talk about that here in the video and we'll get right to it. Okay? God bless. Thanks. Hey everybody, this is Brian, Arizona Latender, and I'm sharing with you now the first of the many DIY projects that I hope to get posted. I figured I've done enough YouTube learning myself and getting things going that I would start to share some of my projects with you and things and talk about just what I've learned as well. And I figure in this generation, as you can see, you can never stop learning. And hopefully with the technology, I'll get one of my kids to help me get this thing edited and we'll have a great video for you on a DIY. So with that, let me show you a little bit about why I have to replace my water heater instead of getting it just a quick repair. And I'll show you a little bit about what's happened between the wood-fired boiler and the water heater in this new house here. And we'll take a look at that here in just a second. Let me flip the camera around and I'll show you what's going on. All right, so this is my water heater, and it is a 50-gallon Richmond natural gas water heater. And for those of you that don't know, because I didn't originally, Richmond is actually owned by the Rheem Corporation. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not, but all the manuals and everything that came with the new one are from Rheem. So I did have to contact them. We'll talk more about that here in just a second. But I'll give you a little bit of background because as you can see, there's a lot of extra pipes coming in and out of my water heater. This house does have a wood-fired boiler that is a secondary heating system. The previous owner used it kind of as a primary. I use it as a emergency backup right now just because I don't have the time with the family and everything to get all the wood and things like that. So it's a great emergency backup. I'll have another video on YouTube shortly here about that, and we'll show you how that thing works. But let me show you a little bit about what happens. My first thing I want to just kind of point out to everybody is you'll notice in this extra piping, there are no valves. There are no shutoff valves in this thing at all, with the exception of that one on the bottom, which is the tap to the hot water heater. And the secondary ball valve that's there feeds what's called a sidearm. That's what this thing is. That black tube is a sidearm heat exchanger. Now, whenever you install something, my number one tip, don't ever forget this. Consider the fact when you have to service it. Because this entire copper system, which goes up to the roof over here, and then along the joists, you can kind of see them pick up in that back wall right over here. Goes all the way down to that wall, down, and that goes out through those insulated tubes in the concrete wall over there. Well, that is where my valves are. And I'll just kind of take a quick step over there and zoom the camera, and you can see that is the shutoff valves for all of that copper piping. Those are two little temperature gauges that are on there as well. Otherwise, all of this copper pipe is unvalved. So, unfortunately, I'm going to get to drain all of it, and let me show you why. When the previous owner installed this system, and I'll try to back up a little because this is not a super wide-angle camera here, but when they installed this system, they put the heat exchanger on the water heater via instructions from the heat exchanger company. And I have the manual, and it does suggest to do this, but I'm going to suggest against it. Again, I'm not a professional. I am not a licensed contractor. I may not know better than the designers, but here's what I do know because I've learned this over the last couple of weeks. Give you a little background of how this heat exchanger works. The water comes out the cold water outlet right here. It goes into the heat exchanger tube, and this is a double cord tube. There's a tube inside a tube here. The water from the hot water heater goes in this, and as it warms through thermodynamic process, it goes up here and back out the top of the tube. Now, if we continue tracing that tube on my water heater, he has come up. I've seen some people say you can be no more than 3 inches, no more than 4 inches from the top of the water heater tank, and it's still permissible. The instructions for this particular tube and system do say 4 inches. He's at 3.5, so he's legitimate there. But as I come up, you'll see he goes back down. I did not know a whole lot about water heaters. I thought that was just another outlet, like maybe one of those white plugs that you see on the top over here. As I've learned, this plug is actually made for what's called an anode rod. And if you don't know anything about this, an anode rod very simply is designed so that all of the deposits and electromagnetic forces and all the magic things that happen inside the water heater, as again, I'm not a professional, I'm not a plumber in this, but they go and they rust on the anode rod and they eat up the anode rod to save the interior of the water heater. Well, the problem with this is he has taken out the anode rod so that he can have this water drop. And as you can see, and it's a little bit tricky in there, but there is a lot of rust down in that hole. And if I grab my rag that's on top of my line over here, kind of dry some of that out so you can see. That rust, I did do some pretty hefty inspection, goes almost all the way down to the bottom of that fitting. I had a friend of mine who's a plumber come over and just take a look at it and tell me, do I need to investigate replacement, or is that rust basically not enough that is going to cause a problem? And his reaction was what I feared. It does go all the way down through that fitting. So my tank is virtually rusted through and going to be breaking, hopefully not before I get it replaced, but it's pretty bad with that rust down in there. So we inspected that and it needs replaced. Now you can see in the back of my picture, I've already got my replacement water heater, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. But we'll go back to our heat exchanger and the side arm. The second part of this, what happens is from outside my wood-fired boiler, this lower bar here, the hot water comes in from the boiler, and I believe the pump is set at 150 or possibly 180, I don't remember. It goes down to the bottom of this heat exchanger, and it goes in, and it's in the sleeve, and as it goes up, again, from thermodynamic process, and the boiler is on a pump, it continues to warm the water from the hot water heater, then comes back out and goes up and back toward the heat exchanger. Now, it does go through the heater. I also have a water to air exchanger over there for the heater. That one, ironically enough, is hooked up with valves properly for replacement if need be. But what I'm getting at is you'll notice there are no valves there. Well, my new water heater is not the exact dimension, and it's a little bit different of what I'm doing. So I am actually going to have to replumb this thing. Not a huge deal. I have not sweat piped successfully, but we've learned through the magic of YouTube, and I'll share that with you when we do the project. But as I'm doing the project, I'm going to have to drain all that copper pipe all the way back to those valves on the back wall. So as opposed to having a couple little shutoffs right here or perhaps even over here and only having to drain a little bit of water, I'm going to have to drain that copper pipe all the way back to the black wall of the basement and then finish that up. So whenever you install something and add it, no matter how you do it, please just do us a favor for those that have to work on it later. Put some valves in there. Put some unions. You'll notice there's no unions in this either. There is in the gas line down there. I've got a union, which is nice, but I'm going to have to put some unions or valves or some different things in there because the life of a water heater, from what I've seen, is expected to be anywhere between 10 to 12 years, and hopefully that copper pipe's going to last longer. So it just seems to me like you would go ahead and put a valve in it. I don't know why he didn't. Of course, you've got the temperature pressure relief valve coming out of the top. You've got the drain coming out of the bottom, all the normal parts of a water heater. Lots of great videos on YouTube about how water heaters work and all kinds of stuff, and that's how I've done it as well. But I wanted to show you a little bit about the heat exchanger and what's hooked up and also what has happened and why I have to replace it. So now let's take a step over and around the back, and I'll show you the new water heater and what's a little bit different with this one. Okay, so we'll take a look now at the brand new water heater. This just came in. I bought it through my local Menards, and the reason I went with Menards, they had a sale going on water heaters, just so happened shortly after I discovered this, and so we went ahead and bought a water heater. Now, this one is a little bit larger. You remember I said the old water heater is 50 gallons. This one is a 75-gallon water heater, so I did pay a little bit more for that, but there's a reason I did, and I'm going to use my light because it's kind of dark down here in the basement. But do you notice on the side of the water heater, right there where my light is, I'll move it away, you can see there's a valve or an inlet that says hot. And down here on the bottom, right there again where my light is, I'll turn that off. And that inlet there says cold. Upon doing all of my research for the central boiler water heater system that I have outside, they show an installation video of this type of water heater that has the extra inlets. And basically you take that side arm and you plumb it directly. The bottom comes out from there as far as you need to adjust for whatever length your side arm is. And the top, at the top of the side arm, goes directly into that outlet right there. I'll move my finger because the camera's focusing wrong. But you go directly back into that outlet there. There's no additional porting or anything else. The reason I've done that, there's a couple different ways. Some people say you can actually go in the temperature pressure relief valve and just get a longer one of those. They have a little rod on the inside of them, how they work. Again, you can YouTube that to see, but I thought that was a neat, interesting idea. But I preferred something that I could directly connect. Obviously, you can come out the drain valve. I'm going to replace that plastic drain. I don't tend to like those. It's one thing I learned when I lived in Arizona is replace those when the water heater's new. That way you don't have to mess with it later. Put a nice big ball valve on it. But what I did find out from talking to the folks at Richmond and or Rheem, which by the way, if you don't think it's a Rheem water heater, this book here, I'll show you how I figured that out. I've got another copy on top. I'm working one-handed here, but I've got another copy on top. And as you go into the book, let me show you here. Go to the back pages. And these were the people I contacted directly for information on this system. But when you get to the back pages, somewhere, here it is right there. If you need service, should you have any questions, contact Parts Montgomery. And you notice the manufacturer's service department right there. Well, if you look up that address, it matches what that website says right there, Rheem. So this water heater, even though it's Richmond and is a little bit cheaper than Rheem, it is a Rheem water heater. And I did find the match for Rheem, and it was about $110 more this particular day when I bought this. So what I was getting at is I did call the folks at Rheem, and you remember, I go over here. There's that anode rod that we replaced. I spoke with them about the rust in that rod, and I said, this is what I've got. I sent them pictures, and unfortunately their answer was what I expected. Because the anode rod was removed, which is not recommended, that voided my warranty. So this water heater, which is only 5 years old, is now worthless. So I bought the little bit more expensive so that I could have the extra inlets. I would not be taking out the anode rod. And I got a family of 5. A few extra gallons of water is not gonna hurt us. So it's something we'll have installed here shortly. So that's the short version of what's going on with the water heater project. And through the magic of television, you guys will, next thing you'll see is I'll have this project started. But my next step right now is I gotta take a day and go buy some parts. I got the water heater in this past weekend. Now I gotta go buy the parts and pieces to make everything fit together so that I'm ready to start the project, and then we'll start that. So I'll be back with you in just a minute. It'll be a day or two for me, and we'll see you soon on more on the water heater project coming up.